One in two women over 50 will break a bone because of osteoporosis. That's it. It's a coin flip. Heads, you're fine. Tails, we're talking fractures, loss of independence, and a whole cascade of health complications. All from a disease that most women, especially listening to this, aren't even thinking about yet.
And here's what gets us. The window to actually do something about it doesn't start closing in your 60s. It starts closing in your 30s, which means if you're listening to this right now and you're anywhere in that range, this conversation is for you. Like right now, you.
Welcome back to the Overthinking Podcast, the show for women navigating fitness and health in a world that makes everything way more complicated than it needs to be. We're your hosts. I'm Bri.
And I'm Kelsie.
And if you're here, chances are you're tired of overthinking every fitness trend that demands us to shrink and has us feeling like we're failing at a system that never wanted to see us win.
This podcast is your space for honest conversations and evidence-based guidance so you can stop spiraling and finally live the healthy, full life that you know you deserve.
So today, we're talking about the single most effective thing that women can do for our longevity. And we'll tell you up front, it's not a calcium supplement or really any supplement, and it's definitely not to drink more milk. It is something that most of us have been dramatically undersold on, and we're going to fix that today. But before we get into it, we have a giveaway, and we've never done this before. Woohoo!
Our first giveaway.
First giveaway, but for good reason. I bargained hard for this for you guys, but we're going to get a free bag of Legion cinnamon cereal protein powder. And honestly, this is the one thing that I influence every single week to Kelsie. I put this protein powder in my yogurt bowls. I put it in my overnight oats. But the best way I use it is actually using it as a sweetener and kind of creamer combo for my coffee. So if
You made
you
this
are
for me. You made this coffee creamer for me in Costa Rica and confirmed it slaps.
it really does slap. You'd never think to put like protein powder in your coffee and have it elevate it, right? But it is so good. And so we want you guys to get in on this goodness. And the way that you can win this free giveaway is first comment on this episode on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. Then when we release the giveaway on Instagram, we want you to tag 3 friends and also follow us on Overt_Thinking Podcast at Brianna Lamb and at Kelsie Michelle. And the last thing we want you to do, and we really are excited about this one, is please subscribe to YouTube and Spotify. The submissions will close on the 27th, which is at the end of the week, and then we'll announce the winner on the 29th. So you have a couple days, get your submissions in, and may the giveaway gods be in your favor. So, Kels, let's get into it.
So let's back up a minute and talk about why this matters, especially for maybe we have a younger audience who's in their 20s or 30s. And even if you're in your 50s, 60s, 70s, this is still going to matter for you. We want to make sure everyone is on the same page about what's actually happening in your body and when. The thing that kind of blew our minds when we started digging into this is your bones aren't static. They are living tissue. They're constantly being broken down and rebuilt, just like your muscles are when you work out. And that process has a peak. And around age 30, you hit your maximum bone density. I didn't say that. That is your maximum bone density by 30. That's it. That's the peak of the mountain. So both Bri, you and I have peaked, you could say.
Which means after 30, it's a slow decline. So for most of your 30s and 40s, it's a gradual enough that you probably won't notice, but then perimenopause hits. And that's when hormones change, lifestyle patterns change, and that's where things really get serious. And women can lose between 3 and 5% of their bone density per year for up to 5 years straight. And that's no exaggeration.
And the cruel part is that you can't feel it or see it. There's no symptoms, there's no warning signs. Bone loss is completely silent until shit hits the fan. So by the time your doctor is sitting across from you saying the word osteoporosis, significant damage is likely already done.
So let's talk about the stakes here because we don't think most women have actually heard these numbers side by side. 80% of Americans with osteoporosis are women. 80% of the American population that has osteoporosis are women, and this is not a gender neutral condition. This is disproportionately and overwhelmingly a women's health issue.
And this stat is one that we had to sit with for a minute. A woman's risk of hip fracture is equal to her combined risk of breast, uterine, and ovarian cancer. So think of each of those as like 4%, 10%, whatever. All three of those are equal to your risk of a hip fracture. We're talking about conditions that have entire awareness months, ribbon campaigns, fundraiser walks, and the thing that poses statistically the same level of threat in a woman's lifetime is an afterthought.
And a hip fracture isn't just like, ooh, ouch, that hurts. No, a hip fracture within 1 year, nearly 1 in 4 women over 65 will die. Not from the fall itself, but from the cascade that follows after the fall. Surgery, immobility, pneumonia, and cardiovascular complications, which we know women are on the downside of that as well. So your risk of dying in the 3 months after a hip fracture is 5 times higher than a woman with the same age who didn't fracture.
Yeah. And I don't know about you, but the older I get, I'm 35, the younger these ages sound. These are genuine life altering complications that lead to loss of independence and long recovery times. So, this is not a someday maybe problem. This is a right now, let's talk about it problem.
Which is exactly why we wanted to start the conversation here. Before perimenopause, before the diagnosis, while there's still a real window to do something meaningful. And it's not to scare you, right? We're not here to scare you with these big numbers and stats, but this is really meant to be a driving force, a motivator so that you can take control of your health and have the tools to do so. And so we're always going to give it to you straight. We are discussing a huge issue for women's health specifically. And now we're going to serve you the science backed solution. So let's get into why strength training works because it isn't just like lifting is good, trust us. There's a really elegant mechanism happening in your body every single time you lift, AKA load your skeleton. When we put mechanical stress on your bones through lifting, jumping, carrying weight, your bone cells actually sense that pressure and they send a signal that says, we need to be stronger here. And so the signal that they're sending, your body responds by activating cells called osteoblasts, which essentially build new bone tissue. So the kind of use it or lose it is an actual biological law.
Yep. And it doesn't stop there. So, resistance training actually also elevates a growth factor called IGF-1, which stimulates both muscle building and bone remodeling at the same time. So, you're not just getting stronger muscles, you are chemically signaling your skeleton to rebuild itself. Which brings us to the study we have to talk about. This is the Lift More trial. It is a randomized control trial, which is, as we know, the gold standard of research. And the results genuinely shifted how researchers think about exercise and bone health. So, what they did, they had postmenopausal women with already low bone mass. They put them through 8 months of twice weekly, 30-minute high intensity and impact training sessions. So, we're talking women who already had bone loss. They're already in the danger zone.
And the results were actually pretty crazy. The women who lifted gained 2.9% lumbar spine bone density. Just your lumbar spine, 2.9% increase, which is obviously, we know, where a lot of the pain happens when we get that low back pain. However, the control group, they only did low intensity home exercise. They lost 1.2% over the same period. So that's almost a 4% swing in bone density just from 8 months of 30 minutes of training twice per week. And another really important point here is the compliance of the individuals that were tested. The women had a program written for them that was safe. They knew exactly what exercises to do and how long the sessions would take, and they understood the expected outcome was improvement. So, because of that structure, the study also reported over 92% compliance, and which us as coaches know, that's incredibly high. And the big takeaway, though, is actually the minimum effective dose. In just 2 resistance training sessions per week, 30 minutes per session, and it had to be true resistance training. So no light home workouts, no cardio circuits, But the group that was doing low intensity home exercise actually lost bone density. Even though they were working out, they lost bone density because they weren't doing the right type that their body needed.
I think that's so important. And if it works for postmenopausal women who are already behind the curve, imagine what building this habit in your 30s, 40s, or even 50s does. You are not playing defense yet. You are still in the window where you can build bone, not just slow the loss.
And I would scream this from the rooftops if I really could to any age woman. We are adaptable at any age, and especially those of you listening to this in your 30s, 40s, and 50s. This isn't one study in isolation telling us what we want to hear. Across multiple studies, moderate to high load resistance training produces an average bone density increase of around 1.82%. And that number might sound kind of small, but we're talking bone health here. We're talking your bones, your skeleton, and the bone density inside your bones, like the bone marrow when you go to a restaurant. Where losses of 3 to 5% during the year, especially during perimenopause years, that's what we're up against. So gaining ground against this matters enormously.
So the science is clear, strength training works. But not all exercise is created equal. And we think this is where a lot of women are unknowingly leaving results on the table. Because walking is great, yoga is great, Pilates is great. We just did an episode on that. But if longevity is the goal, we need to talk about what specifically moves the needle and the intensity required to do so.
Yeah. So let's talk about the exercises that actually work for this goal. And let's build out a little bit of like a lifting hierarchy because there is a genuine tier system when it comes to the movements that really elicit longevity and bone building stimuli. But then there's some movements that don't. And knowing which movements and where they are on that kind of hierarchy helps you make smarter decisions when you're training. And especially if you're auto regulating based on, your energy level. So let's start with tier one. That's the top of the pyramid, compound lifts. You've heard us say this so many times on our episode, but we're talking about deadlifts, squats, barbell pressing, bent over rows. These are your highest bang for your buck movements because you're using more than just one joint and because they load the spine and the hips and the wrists simultaneously, which are not coincidentally the exact three sites where osteoporotic fractures most commonly happen. And at True Health, that's where we actually do bone density scans on all of our osteoporosis patients, and it is crazy to see some of these like women who walk in and they look fit and healthy and like I don't know, they look pretty healthy, but their bones are just completely like kind of like fossils.
I would This makes me think of all the, like, skinny trend that's going on right now, like, if all the celebrities that you see images of, like the Osbournes just at the whatever award show that was happening recently. You have Demi Moore, who's looking ultra thin. One of the posts that I've seen recently is, like, talking about how these celebrities, you're free to live however you want, but they have the tools, the wealth, and the community and people and staff to take care of them when they're older. The rest
Yep.
of us, I'm not in that tax bracket. I don't know about you guys, but I don't have anyone to take care of me besides myself. So, if this sounds scary or you're like, I don't know how my bones are, great. This episode is your start. Let's saddle up and let's go.
And if you're like a little bit scared of lifting, like that's okay. We're going to give you the tricks of the trade. If you spend the next 2 weeks learning a couple compound lifts, that's going to dramatically change your life now and especially in the next 30 years.
Right? Your body is smart. It builds bone where there is demand. So if you want stronger hips, you need to load your hips. A deadlift does that in a way that a leg press or a stationary bike simply cannot to the same degree. That's not to say that a leg press isn't great. It is, of course, but it is not going to be as good. You're not going to be able to load as heavy as a deadlift. So that leads us to tier two, which is impact training. So this is things like jumping, box step offs, squat jumps. This one surprises people because we don't always think that jumping is a bone health tool, but the ground reaction force that you need when you land is actually a really potent signal for bone remodeling, especially at the hips or knees.
And the dose here is genuinely accessible for most people. And research suggests that even 20 to 30 jumps per day can meaningfully improve your hip bone density. That's literally like 2 minutes of per day. You could just do that in your kitchen. You
Right.
could just jump while your coffee's being made. I don't know if I can
Yeah.
jump and brush my teeth. Yeah. Yeah, for the next 2 minutes of this episode, get your jumps in, please.
Yeah.
But I
Yeah.
will tell a story about this though, because if you are somebody who is, generally pretty healthy and your bones feel pretty good right now, implement this now because you don't want to implement this when you're 65. And I did work with a woman at True Health recently who was diagnosed with osteoporosis. So she started going to a workout class. And then she told her doctor she was going to this workout class. He goes, "Great. Well, in order to strengthen your bones, I want you to stomp every time you take a step in your dance class." Which in theory, we would say, okay, that sounds about right, right? Like the force reaction sounds about,
Yeah.
well, she had osteoporosis already. She broke both of her feet in one class. She
Oh,
literally
no.
fractured both of her feet by stomping because she was already
Oh,
so
no.
far
She was
gone on
stomping
the.
too hard.
She was stomping because she was being told to stomp. And I think this highlights that, like, the medical
Right.
professionals, even if they know the research, they're not doing it in the way that's applicable. And that's why coaching matters. So I'll leave that there.
Yeah.
Bring us to tier three, Kels.
Yeah. I don't know if that's the doctor's fault, but anyway. So, tier 3 is going to be your weight bearing cardio. So, walking, stair climbing, dancing. And we want to be clear, this is not saying these things don't count. They absolutely do. Weight bearing beats non weight bearing every single time. But the research is pretty consistent that cardio alone, even at high volumes, is not sufficient to maintain or build bone density the way that resistance training is. It is a complement, not a substitute.
So, what are the actual parameters that we're aiming for? Because lift heavy is super vague and we don't do vague here. So, we want specific, actionable takeaways. What do you think, Kelsey?
Well, the research points to training at least 70% or more of your 1 rep max, meaning the weight should feel challenging, very challenging, 3 times a week. That's it. And the principles of progressive overload apply, meaning you need to keep increasing the demand over time because your bones adapt just like your muscles do. Once something stops being a challenge, it stops being a stimulus.
Mic drop. Okay, but also if you're sitting here thinking, I don't know what my 70% of my 1 rep max is, or don't even know what a 1 rep max is, that is okay. That is most people. But a practical way for you to think about it is that your 70% max effort is like the last 2 or 3 reps of your set should feel genuinely hard. Like you should not be able to focus on anything else but that rep, not necessarily a dangerous or a sloppy rep, but like a challenging rep. And you should think, I could have done maybe one more, but I might risk losing my form or risk losing the focus on the muscle that I'm using. That's the zone you want to be in. And if you need a little bit more explanation of what that stimulus really feels like, you can actually refer back to our previous episode on autoregulation, number 26, called How Heavy Should I Be Lifting?
So let's talk a little bit about prevention, and we'll circle back to something we mentioned at the very beginning of the episode, because I think it's the thing that most women genuinely don't know. It's the thing that changes how urgent this feels. And it's the window, because there is a window and we want to get ahead of it because it's not open forever.
And the framework that I keep coming back to is this. Think of your bone density a little bit like a savings account. Your whole childhood and early adulthood, you're making deposits. These deposits are a combination of playing sports in school, playing at recess, jumping on and off things, exploring and adventuring, and just being generally active when we're younger. However, if you don't continue to play sports and lift weights, the bank stops accepting those deposits. Then, when we turn 30, our lives kind of start to slow down a little bit more. We become more sedentary, less adventurous, and during perimenopause, especially, that's where withdrawals start happening, whether you authorize them or not. So the question is never really, should I think about bone health? But the question is, how full is your account once those withdrawals start? Because that gap between bone density you enter perimenopause with and then the threshold where fractures become likely is what determines your outcomes decades from now.
Yep. And this is where the quote unquote, I'll deal with it when I'm older mindset becomes genuinely risky. I don't know about you, but every time I have a pain or an ache, I'm like, man, that's a later problem. I'm not going to deal with that. I'm just going to ignore it till it goes away. But by the time menopause hits, you're already losing bone rapidly. The time to build the buffer isn't during the loss, it's before. You can't out supplement or out exercise a decade of inaction once you're in the thick of it. This is not meant to be scary, it's meant to be clarifying because the women in their 30s listening to this, you are in the best possible position. And you still have the time to make a habit before your hormones shift. You are not playing catch up just yet.
And here's what it actually looks like in practice. If you spend your 30s building a consistent strength training habit, you enter perimenopause with a bigger bone bank, which means even as you're losing 3 to 5% per year, you're losing it from a higher starting point. So the floor is higher and the margin is wider. And that really is the whole game.
I love the idea of a bone bank. Like, it just reminds me of some like villain, like the bone collector. I
Yes.
don't know why.
I love it. I feel like we could be so spooky with it.
Like, Brie, what's up with your bone bank these days?
Yeah, my bone bank's at a solid 47. I'm chilling at my bone bank at a I don't even know what that metric means, but it feels right. Like, what if we measured our success on,
What's
like,
the
our bone
propaganda
bank?
we need to start?
Imagine if, like, instead of your, like, basal met or no, instead of, like, the scale, you were, like you stepped onto, like, your bone bank scale, and you're like, "Oh my god, how's my bone density doing today?"
That's what I'm saying. Like, what's the propaganda we need to start pushing for women to instead of like looking at the scale and like wanting to be skinny, we're like, what's your BMD? What's up?
Tell me what your BMD is. And I think people look at body fat like, that's the thing about all these GLP-1s is, like, propaganda is trying to make skinny be cool so we can sell more GLP-1s and everybody looks like Skeletor, but the reality is that, like, no
Is
one's
it
seeing
though? I don't know if it's propaganda. I
no,
think it's just
they're
people.
trying to,
People want
but
this.
but it's also, like, still from a consumerist lens because everybody taking GLP-1s who did get all skinny is, like, seeing all these people are getting strong and juicy booties, and they're like, "No, we think being skinny is cool," and it's like, just because you want everyone to also be skinny because that's what you wanted your whole life doesn't mean that that's what everybody else wants because people are smartening up now finally and realizing that lifting weights and eating enough food is actually the thing that's going to keep you enjoying that skinny body for years and years to come.
Yes.
Okay.
And we also want to mention if you're listening to this and you're feeling a bit disheartened, thinking, I'm already in my 40s and 50s, I've missed the window. The answer is no, emphatically no. The 30s are the ideal window, but the research includes women across a huge range, including women who already have osteoporosis and osteopenia. And here's what's remarkable: resistance training has been shown to actually increase bone density in women who already have bone loss, not just slow it down. That's not maintenance, that's building back. The best time was 10 years ago, the second best time is now.
And we can say that for anything, right? If you're feeling sluggish on your training right now, like the best time is today. And what we're really asking you to do is stop treating this like a future problem because your bones are being built or lost right now as we speak today. So, based on what you're doing with your body, that's where you're at. And that's actually really empowering when you think about it because it means that you have so much more control over what you've previously been told, right? How exciting. We can actually get more consistent and more compliant with training the more we know. And if you're in a sluggish season with training right now, then this actually might be the catalyst to getting the ball rolling for you in the right direction.
Yeah. Yeah. Train for your old lady body.
I mean, I wanna train for my body now, like, I feel like some of my bones do be creaking these days, and I'm only 33, and, like, I don't know, like, my hip be making sounds sometimes I'm not loving, and I I do know that I should be jumping more and probably loading my spine a little bit more.
I know. Yes, I'm definitely not jumping 20 times a day, but I did a couple box jumps today, so felt pretty good about that.
Perfect.
Great. So we spent a lot of this episode talking about bones, and we're going to keep doing that. But we want to zoom out for a second because the case for strength training goes so far beyond bone density that we'd be doing you a disservice to not say it out loud. So let's start with the number that genuinely stopped us in our tracks when we first saw it. Women who do strength training combined with 150 minutes of or more of cardio per week have a 46% lower risk of all cause mortality, nearly half. That's compared to women who do neither strength training nor aerobic activity.
Yep. And here's what makes this specifically a women's conversation. The benefit is not the same across sexes. For all cause mortality, strength training produced a 12% risk reduction in women versus just 3% in men. For cardiovascular mortality specifically, it was a 16% in women versus 4% in men. The same habit, but dramatically different return depending on your biology.
And the even wilder finding is women who strength trained just once a week had a similar all cause mortality reduction as men who did 3 times a week. So finally, the pay gap, it works in our favor.
Thank God.
We are getting more out of this for once. We are getting more out of this than we've been told by a lot.
And beyond mortality, let's talk a little bit about what this looks like in daily life because we think mortality risk can feel abstract in a way. And can I get up off the floor unassisted when I'm 80? Kind of doesn't, right? It's more tangible. Falls are the leading cause of injury related death in adults over 65. And what prevents falls? Muscle and bone strength, including balance and proprioception. So these are all things that resistance training directly builds. This is not vanity. This is functional independence. And this is also being able to carry in your groceries, play with your kids and grandkids, to travel all over the world, to jump in and out of waterfalls, and to live your actual life without assistance or having to ask for help. And if you're a woman who hates asking for help, like me, as I'm trying to do my taxes, it's hard to ask for help. And this is the one thing that you can do.
And then there's the metabolic portion. So, because muscle is metabolically active tissue, the more of it that you have, the better your body manages blood sugar, the more efficiently you burn fuel at rest, the more resilient you are to metabolic shifts that come with perimenopause and menopause. Strength training isn't just a bone intervention or a cardiovascular intervention, it's a whole system plan.
Yes. And so when we say this is the single most effective thing women can do for their longevity, we mean it. Not for aesthetics, not to shrink, but to actually live longer, move better, and stay independent. And that's really the whole point, isn't it? So if you spent most of your life, like me and like us, using training for punishment to be skinny or to look a certain way, hearing this episode might be the unlock that you needed in your 30s and beyond to actually get and stay consistent with resistance training in a way that's far beyond just aesthetics.
Yes. One of the things that I will never forget, I was probably like 27. And I think that was right before you started caring about these things, right? Because you're in your 20s, you're like, nothing matters. I'm invincible. I'm going to live forever. I'll never get sick. But as you get older, these things start to worry you more, right?
Yeah.
And I was walking around this shopping area in San Diego and I saw this older gentleman. He was maybe 60s, 70s, just fell in the middle of the hustle and bustle of everybody, just fell, couldn't get up on his own. And I was watching this and I was like, I never want to be in that position. And I still think of it almost every time I go train. I'm like, I don't want to do this today, but I'm going to do it for my old lady self and to look good
Yeah.
naked, of course.
Totally. I mean, I think it's such a big highlight to think about how much independence we have right now as women in our 30s. Right now, I could physically go run to the store if I wanted to. If someone asked me to go climb a mountain with them, I wouldn't think twice. Sure, I could do that. I wanted to scale
Right.
across a waterfall, totally. But like you said, the more exposure we see, and sometimes it's from seeing it in other people. I had a conversation before this episode and I'm talking about where our moms are, and it's crazy. It's crazy to see that my mom's fallen and broken her wrist. This person's mom's fallen and broken their wrist. It's this happens often and to loved ones around us. So I think we should give you guys
Right.
some practical takeaways. I know we've given you quite a bit in this episode already, but let's synthesize it and bring it home. If you're brand new to strength training, start with 2 days a week, 30 minutes, compound lifts. Squat, hinge, pull, push, and you don't need it to be all complicated. You just need consistency, especially when you're a newbie, and you just need progressive overload, meaning you keep making it a little bit harder each week. More sets, reps. We have episodes on that.
And if you're already training but you're not lifting heavy, this is your nudge. The research is pretty clear that the bone and mortality benefits are tied to moderate to high loads. That means the weight should feel challenging by the last few reps. If it doesn't, it's time to push it or find a coach who can be your objective eye.
Yes. And if you're in your 30s listening to this thinking, that feels really far away, please let this episode be the thing that changes that. Your window is wide open right now, and the deposits you're making now are the buffer that you're making that you'll be so grateful for in the next 30 years.
Yes. A few things to look for in a program: compound lifts as the foundation, progressive overload built in, and ideally some impact work. So things like jumping, hopping, single leg work, even just adding 20 to 30 jumps a few times a week on top of your lifting. The light weights are not going to cut it, and just doing Pilates alone is not going to cut it either.
And I know we talked about this a little earlier in the episode, but it's same thing with like walking. Walking itself is not enough. That is a foundation to your movement plan. And if this resonated with you, please share it with somebody who also needs a little bit of a light bulb moment, because we know a lot of women need to be hearing this, especially given the stats we said today. And this kind of information just cannot be gatekept.
Thank you for being here and for caring about your health in a way that goes deeper than the way that you look. Connect with us on Instagram at overt_thinking podcast, at Brianna Lamb, at Kelsie Michelle, and we will see you
In the
in
next
the next
episode.
episode.
Also, if you didn't already, go and subscribe to our channel and follow us. That protein powder bag could be yours, and this osteoporosis could not be. Okay?